Hi, teachers, and welcome back to Lesson Gems. My name is Brother Lammers. I have the lesson that is assigned for Tuesday, November the 26th, or the lesson in your seminary teacher curriculum labeled Doctrinal Mastery Ether 1227. This is a really fun lesson, brothers and sisters, and I invite you to trust it. The reason I invite you to trust it is because sometimes the doctrinal mastery lessons can be a little bit more of a game-centric, or let's just work on this or practice this, or a day that we take off. And those things are all great and they all have their time and their place. But I truly feel that Ether chapter 12, verse number 27 needs to be understood and practiced. So let's try to help them do this today. The desired outcome is to do exactly that. So at the beginning of the lesson today, I want you to invite your students to let them know you're going to be very deliberate. Today we want to accomplish this. And here's how we're going to try to accomplish our goal. And one of the goals could be we want to be able to explain and live what is being taught in Ether 1227 better. And here's the first way that we're going to try to accomplish that. If you go down to explain and memorize, it gives a great little example here of how you could help them explain and know the doctrine just a little bit better. But I love this activity from the new curriculum of 2025 Doctrine and Covenants, and let me show you again what that looks like. If you go into your gospel library, so if you're in the church's website, or if you go here to gospel library, or if you're on your phone, please go to books and lessons. After your books and lessons, touch on seminary, and then here's the new curriculum for next year. If you touch on Doctrine and Covenants 2025 and scroll down to the very bottom on the left-hand side, here is the appendix. In the appendix is the ideas for variety. There is a section here that helps you to know there are 4 different ways you can separate these ideas. And deepen understanding is what we want. In the deepen understanding, if you scroll down onto this activity that is called, make sure I get to it. There we go. Power phrases. I love this activity for this specific example in our curriculum for today. And so here are the power phrases that I would invite my students to look at. They know Ether 1227. The day before, they should have had the contextual lesson. But also, as we were looking at this Ether 1227, I love this verse because fill in the blank. A phrase that was insightful. And choose 3 or 4 or 5 of these bullet points, or have them go through it all. Do it together as a class or individual as a student with their journal. But I want them to really tear apart this verse so they can be able to know and understand, and now be able to explain why this verse is very important. And then please take just 3 minutes. This is a really, really easy key phrase to memorize. And if you just take 3 minutes with it, and I invite you to do it in 2 different ways. Say it out loud with each other. If men come unto me, then I will make weak things become strong unto them. And divide it into 2 sections. And then after you said it 3 or 4 times, you have 1 chance to write it all down. And then if somebody writes it all down word for word perfect, they get this, a Tootsie Roll or a high five or whatever it may be. But just take 3 minutes, 2 different activities to engage their mind. Then they're going to have the reference and the key phrase memorized. Now we know, we begin to understand a little bit better. It's a key phrase that's in my mind and in my heart. This is probably the most important part. It's the practice. How do I practice living what I now know and understand just a little bit better? Let's try to live this. This activity is intended to help our students practice living. And it is spot on. So good. It even gives you an example. And I want to do this with you. I want to walk through this with you. The teaching method that I love to use when we're talking about practicing something is define, model, and then practice. Tell them that we're going to do this 2 or 3 times, and then model it with them as you go through the very first activity. And I want to show you what that looks like right now. If I'm up at the board with my students and we're going to walk through this activity together, again, I want to define it. We defined what it is. Now let's model it with them. And remember, this is right out of our curriculum. So the weakness that we want to practice is we spend too much time on our phones. So let's take the principles of acquiring spiritual knowledge and let's practice how we can live this better. You guys, in your journals, please write this down. Act in faith. And now, if I were to try to act in faith, knowing that a weakness I have is spending too much time on my phone, and this is very applicable because I do, what might my prayers actually sound like if I were to pray to Heavenly Father for help to not be so addicted to my phone? What would I actually say? What would it sound like? How can I use my phone to grow closer to Jesus Christ? What could I do to use my phone in order to live better? Now let's look at the eternal perspective. Now, if someone doesn't try to overcome their weakness to be addicted to their phones, how might it affect their future relationship? How might it affect a future job, schools, etc.? Fill in the blank. How might it affect that? We approach it from the eternal perspective. Or lastly, divinely appointed sources. Let me share with you a couple of divinely appointed sources. If you go into the Gospel Library app, and if you just type in appropriate use of technology, there is 2 awesome articles, Using Technology Safely, and 15 prompts for balancing tech at home and in our lives. And so just different ways that we can use these divinely appointed sources to practice at doing this. Then, as we mentioned before, we want to try to do this twice. In the supplemental learning activity, it gives you 2 prompts that could be power ways to go right into and to be able to invite our students to do it on their own, be led by you again, or in groups of 2 or 3 to do the same thing. My weakness is I feel my imperfections and I compare myself to others. My weakness is I'm being overwhelmed by whatever it may be. So weakness equals this, 3 principles of divinely appointed sources, and now go through it and let's really tear it apart. Let's try to practice this. As I wrap up my lesson today, I want to quickly review with them, hey, let's say it out loud. What is the reference and the key phrase? Have them say it out loud. But then lastly, how are they going to go live what they felt or prompted to do today better? And so they leave class. And then me as a teacher, this is what I want to do. I want to use my time, and I'm going to send a quick email or a text message, which was probably a little bit more effective if I'm being honest. And I want to send to my parents of my students, hey, today in class, we practiced living what we learned in Ether 1227. So whatever stood out in your class, invite your parents or your families to follow up with their students at home. Hey, please invite your child to explain Ether 1227 a little bit better to you as the parent. I want you to explain or to invite your child to share with them the principles of acquiring spiritual knowledge, ASK. What stood out to them in acquiring spiritual knowledge? How can they act in faith better if they know they have a weakness? What is something that stood out to them? Or lastly, how could they, meaning their student, their child, help the family overcome a weakness better? It's such a powerful font to teach it in class, invite them personally to go live it. But now let's use our families to follow up with our students, these wonderful, wonderful students. How can their families now continue on with the trying to practice the doctrine taught in Ether 1227? Teachers, you are so good. You are so good at loving your students, and I'm just humbled to be a part of what you guys get to do. I hope that there's some ideas in here today to help your students try to practice living the gospel of Jesus Christ, specifically the doctrines and principles that they've been learning the past couple of days with Ether 1227. Help them understand there is weaknesses, there's an intent for weaknesses, but here are some practical application ways that I can go and live what I'm learning. Involve those parents. Teachers, again, thank you for all that you do. We'll see you again soon.